after this event with the leper. And I keep saying that a lot of these aren't chronological, but in terms of the narrative that's given, Jesus then enters, after the Sermon on the Mount, after the leper, he then enters Capernaum, right up here at the north part of the Sea of Galilee. And this is the story of the centurion, which we looked at last week. The centurion came forward. Of course, we looked at it from Luke. A centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed and suffering terribly," which Matthew gives different description than Luke does. There's Luke says that he is ill. Matthew describes him as being paralyzed. He's suffering greatly. Then Jesus says, "I will come and heal him." And then this is one of the interesting things, at least that I think Luke has this, where the centurion sends emissaries. You know, in Luke, the centurion sends elders of the people, and then he sends some of his own people in the second situation. Matthew has them where the centurion speaks to Jesus specifically. The centurion came forward to appealing to Jesus. "Lord, my servant is ill." Jesus says, "I will come." The centurion replies, "I am not worthy to have you come." So that whole scene is there. Matthew chooses to tell it first person. Luke chooses to tell it third person, if you will, in terms of the elders of the people and some of the people that worked with the centurion, apparently. And it's very possible that Matthew, writing to the Jews, wants this connection specific with the centurion specifically talking to Jesus. Luke, written to general audience of Gentiles, doesn't want that for whatever case. So you have the story of the centurion, which ends, the servant was healed at that very moment. And so they are in Capernaum, and this is where it's not stated, but it doesn't say he left. And so Jesus then enters Peter's house, and you have the story of Peter's mother-in-law, Peter's wife's mother, who has this fever and gets healed. Also, in verse 16, that evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons. He cast them out the spirits with the word, and healed all who were sick. So he's still in Capernaum here. At least that seems to be what the narrative is telling us. And so Jesus saw that the crowd was around him, and he gave orders to go over to the other side. And the other side is ultimately going to be this Gadarenes. And maybe some of you have studied this and gotten a more specific location, but it doesn't matter, seem to matter how you spell it. There's about 4 different locations that this could be. But all of the ones that I found seem to be the Gadarenes and Gennesaret seem to be the same place, which is right here. And I guess it could be here, but that's a very different spelling. So part of the point I wanted to make today is it states the other side, but it's very possible that the other side was the other side of the region, which is from here to here, this area. And I read about these storms on the Sea of Galilee that come up fairly quick and are very, very challenging. And apparently in these mountainous areas, the cold air from these mountains comes down into the Sea of Galilee, and the warmer air from the east, the west, and the south creates these storms, mostly in this area because of the cold and the warm. And so it's not as if they had to go across. Even coming out to this area, the storms can be pretty rough. So if it is the case that they go from here to here, and they have this whole storm that pipes up. Jesus gets into the boat, his disciples followed him, and then this great storm arose. And apparently these things rise. It's almost like sometimes a tornado, in Oklahoma, Arkansas, that area. When the tornadoes hit, they can be very quick. They hit, they do some destruction, and then they don't leave, they dismantle, they disappear. The things that caused the tornado are then gone. And it's very possible the same thing is happening on the Sea of Galilee. This great storm hits, and the problem with the storm isn't the storm. What is the problem with the storm? That they're there. That they're on the Sea of Galilee whenever the storm hits. It's almost kind of like a tornado or a hurricane. If a tornado goes through a place that's not inhabited, is there anything wrong with the tornado? No. If a hurricane goes over an island that nobody lives on, does anybody notice? Does it even get reported? It doesn't. So the issue with this great storm isn't the great storm, it's the fact that Jesus and his disciples are in a boat crossing or going to the other side while the storm hits. So the boat was being swamped by the waves, but Jesus is asleep. And they went and woke him, and they said, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." Has this story ever been kind of curious to you, at least what we understand of these boats? They're not large boats. I mean, they're not tiny, but they're not large. And there's this storm happening, and what is Jesus doing? Yeah, he's not even taking a nap. He seems to be out. He is asleep. And the disciples go to him and they tell him, I would imagine it wasn't a calm thing. We are perishing. We're going to die. So he tells them, verse 26. Yeah.
But then they're amazed at what he was able to do.
Yeah. It's amazing that he did it. Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Yeah, they marveled at what he had done. Yeah, so why wake him up? Unless you're fairly confident, which, to that point, Teresa, it's interesting. There are times of all the things that they saw Jesus do, whenever he does something like this, it still amazes them. They still marvel at him, and they say, what sort of man is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? Because further up, he heals Peter's mother-in-law of a disease or of a fever, and he's going to heal a guy from a distance. He's going to do exorcisms. Verse 16, that evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirit with a word, healed all who were sick. So he's dealt with physical issues. He's dealt with the netherworld, the demonic world, whatever you want to call it. And now he is going to deal with nature. And also notice this flow here of what Matthew is putting together. All of the things that Jesus is dealing with, and it's not hard for him. He's not sitting over there hyperventilating. He's not stressed. He's not anxious. He's not telling Peter, James, and John or anybody, I hope I can do the next one. I hope this keeps up, right? I hope this stays up and I keep the power. He didn't say any of those things. He just takes care of this stuff. So verse 28, when he came to the other side of the country of the Gadarenes, and again, now some of you may right now be looking this stuff up, and that would be great because then I would get some additional information. But from what I gathered, it's right here. And they went the other side, could possibly mean the other side of the region. And maybe if you lived, how many of you, the area you grew up in, there's phrases that are used, the other side, and we're going to go to the other place or whatever. And people that grew up there know those phrases. They know what those things mean. Because for me, the other side is from here to here. But it's very possible this region, the other side, means to do this. And if a lot of your storms are bad here, then you get out too far and you could have some really, really rough storms in that area. So they get to the other side, they come up here, and they meet this guy that is demon possessed. And one of the curious things, at least to me, in this story is we get nothing from the disciples. Matthew chooses to tell us only the interaction between this man with demons and Jesus himself. The disciples are out of this story from Matthew's perspective. And so as soon as they just came from this storm, as soon as they get out, they're probably still processing. What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? They had seen him heal Peter's mother-in-law. They'd seen him perform exorcisms. And now they get to the other side, the country of the Gadarenes. 2 demon-possessed men meet him. And coming out of the tomb, so fierce that no one could pass that way, and behold, they cried out. It's almost as if as soon as Jesus touched the shore, they begin this interaction with him. What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? And a herd of many pigs were feeding at some distance from them. The demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, send us into the herd of pigs. Jesus allowed that. And so all these pigs go down the bank into the sea, and they drown in the water. So the very waters they were just in and almost died in, to their perspective, now these pigs go into that same water. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, you would assume is the actual city of Gennesaret or the Gadarenes. And they told the city everything that had happened, especially what had happened to the demon-possessed man. Behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. And there are a lot of, I don't know if assumptions is the right word, a lot of ideas in terms of why were there pigs here? Why did Jesus allow the demons to go into the pigs? And why would they? Because we don't know how long this guy had been there. Matthew doesn't choose to tell us. Could be a couple of days, could be a week, could have been much longer that he was here. But they could not go into this area because of this demon-possessed man. And then Jesus exorcises these demons, and they want Jesus out of there. Any thoughts on that? I don't know how many lessons you've heard or things that you've watched or listened to about this. But for whatever reason, it's possible they don't know who Jesus is. They've just heard of him. And now he is going to interact with this demon-possessed man and get the demons out of him and put them into pigs. So they want him gone. I think something else interesting is that for us, this is Jesus, Son of God, Messiah, all those kind of ideas, and all true. But for these folks, he wasn't that. And Jesus then has this interaction with this man that they've watched for who knows how long. And he's not scared of this man. And in fact, he has this whole conversation with him. And he then ends up, Jesus does, taking this demonic spirit into the pigs, into their business. It's almost as if today, somebody comes along and deranges cows, and the cows end up, I don't know, running headlong into the side of a mountain and dying, whatever. You're probably not going to view that guy in the highest of lights. Yeah.
I don't know if yours says it, but mine says 2 men, not 1. 2 people.
Yes.
It wasn't just 1.
Do I keep saying one? Okay. Yeah.
A demon's a demon, but there were 2 of them in this.
Yeah.
At this point, and he took care of both of them.
Yeah. Because I know Luke hits this story, and I think with Luke it's 1, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah.
I get the pigs that were there as opposed to sheep or goat or lamb, being that pigs were abhorrent to the Jews.
Right.
One of those thoughts that jumps out.
It very much is. And one of the frustrations for me is that of all the different sources I've tried to hit on this, people have, if these were Jews, because again, you have Capernaum, which is where Jesus made his hometown, Cana, Nazareth, I think Jerusalem's down here in this area somewhere, Bethsaida. So you have these areas that are Jewish. So why would this community over here, again, if it's here, have pigs? Because if they are Jews, that's a problem. If they're Gentiles, then that kind of raises a different issue. And so, yeah, I definitely think I think that's one of the reasons why Matthew tells the story as well as Luke, is to highlight that idea. Yeah.
He was cleaning out two problems at the same time.
Yeah. No. It's a very honest proposition that because if you notice, Jesus doesn't make the offering. The demon does. Instead of tormenting us before the time, and that could be a 45-minute discussion, instead of tormenting us before our time, send us into, and in fact, they didn't ask. And I didn't look up this word, but I assume beg probably means begged. They begged Jesus to cast us into this herd of pigs. And so Jesus said, go for it. And the reason I think that's important is because Jesus didn't do this on his own accord, so to speak. They requested it, and Jesus allowed it. Yeah.
Do you know if Jewish law let them use pigs for other stuff like, leather and stuff to make?
That I understand, no. Yeah, they're not supposed to be around them at all. That's what I understand. I could be off on that a little bit, but and another interesting question is, pigs existed as well as other animals that they weren't supposed to touch. So was it just a Gentile thing? Because pigs existed. God made them. He just didn't want the Jews to have anything to do with them, as well as other animals,
Roman occupied.
Yeah.
Roman herdsmen.
Yeah. And it's possible that to that point that these pigs didn't live here. They were being herded, although I'm now realizing I know less than zero about pigs, other than what I assume everybody else in the world knows about them. What are the 2 things that pigs are good for? There you go. Seriously. How many of y'all like bacon? And ham, and pork, So it's very possible, I think that's an interesting point, that they were herding them as opposed to this being, like they were, and I don't think you herd pigs. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I had a really bad joke. I'm glad I didn't say it out loud. Okay, so this takes place here, and we are right here. That's what's happening. And the reason I point these other places out is in terms of geography of Cana, way over here. Who's good with like ish distances? Anybody? Because I'm not. But I imagine that's a long way. Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, is over here. And I grew up around a place called Lake Livingston. I mean, we weren't there a lot, but it was there. This is probably a very, very normal situational places for them. So they wanted him to leave. Yeah.
Nazareth, Capernaum is 66 kilometers.
Okay, you're going to have to convert that. I know what a 10K is. So you said Nazareth to what? Oh, to Capernaum? So a 10K is 6 miles, so what would that be, 45 miles? Yes. I was close. 41 miles? So that's 41 miles. So I would assume Cana to Capernaum is about the same-ish, give or take. So they begged him to leave, and he does. He takes off. And it may be a small thing, but at least notice that they asked Jesus to leave, and what does Jesus not do? He doesn't stay and argue. He doesn't say, look, if you only knew what I could do, and look what I did for you, I helped you with this guy. At least Matthew doesn't include that, if it did happen. They asked Jesus to leave, and he leaves. He goes. He says, all right. So this man who has healed people and done exorcisms and now has taken demons out of this man. And I would assume that some people possibly saw this entire interaction. Or maybe they're just mad that their herd was lost. He leaves. So, Matthew chapter 9. And part of the reason we're doing this is I know I am very, I don't know if guilty is the right word, but I kind of get caught up in a paragraph in a story of something that happened as opposed to kind of following movements. They are then, again, if they're here, they get back into the boat and they cross over back to his hometown of Capernaum, to his own city. Now, do you remember why they left and went to Gennesaret in the first place? In chapter 8? Chapter 8, verse 18. Is that 18? Yeah. He had just, he has the situation, he cleansed the leper, helps the centurion, and then he just heals a ton of people. He heals people who were oppressed by demons, heals the sick, and does this amazing stuff. And when Jesus saw a crowd around him, and maybe this is the same type of crowd, whenever the woman with the issue of bleeding, and they're walking down that corridor, and he says, who touched me? And do you remember what Peter said? Dude, everybody's touching you. But he felt the power leave him. And maybe it's that same kind of thing. There's just so many people. And what are they possibly there for? What is their interest in being around Jesus? Like, honestly. Food and healing. Yeah. And he had taken care of a ton of people. So they go from Capernaum to over here. Just a short distance, but enough to possibly get away from the crowds. And the disciples follow him. And not only do they hit this storm, they also hit this guy with demons. And this may be a bit of a side note. But it just kind of occurred to me how not sensitive Jesus had to be. Because he actually helps this community of people, and they tell him to get out. Leave. We don't want you here. And so they get back into the boat. He crosses over, came to his own city, and behold, some people brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. And Jesus saw their faith. Now, by this time of the day, at least with what Matthew presents to us, what is your mindset, your energy level, your ability to focus on people? Where are you? I know where I am. Yeah. I'm like, man, the gas tank is way low. Yeah, Ty. That's funny. What are you trying to say, Ty? What's your point? Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I'm very much an introvert, so I get that. So again, where do you think Jesus is now? What is his process? And we can only surmise. I mean, Luke or Matthew doesn't tell us. I imagine he's exhausted. Because if you look through all the things that he did, I just can only imagine. And yet, this, as soon as they cross over and he gets into Capernaum, possibly gets out of the boat, and they bring him a paralytic. Why would they bring him a paralytic on a bed? Why did Jesus? What had just happened in Capernaum? Everybody got healed. Both healings and exorcisms. Now, just so we're on the same page, sometimes I forget that when I say exorcisms, of course, I'm talking about not like the movie Exorcist, but demon dispossession. That's all I mean by that. They are exorcised. They are taken out of the person. So Jesus performs not only healings, but all these exorcisms. So whenever they get back, however much time was spent in the middle, and we don't know, Matthew doesn't tell us. They get in the boat, they go to the other side, and it seems like whenever they hit land, some people brought him a paralytic lying on a bed. Guy couldn't move. And the reason I think this is important is oftentimes when I am spent and there are needs in front of me, can you call me tomorrow? Can I have a little break? And I would imagine that all of you are somewhat the same. You know, like maybe you get home from work and you've had a demanding day and someone's like, hey, can you? And you're like, look, I don't know how that sentence ends, but no. I'm tired. I'm done. I'm exhausted.
He did sleep in the boat going.
He did say So you're saying Jesus had a power nap? Oh, thank you for that. I needed that. So notice here, Jesus is noticing people. He saw their faith. So what did that faith look like? And I'm not being facetious, I'm being serious. What did the faith look like?
Taking and going into taking their friend
Yeah.
who had a serious problem.
Very serious problem. Yeah. They take him to Jesus. Now again, I believe Luke goes into more detail about this story. But Matthew does not give us anything that they say. I believe Luke does. Matthew does not. All Matthew highlights is Jesus noticed, saw, highlighted their faith, their confidence in the fact that he could heal him. And so he says to the paralytic, take heart, my son, your what? Sins are forgiven. And behold, some of the scribes said to themselves, this is blasphemy. But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, see again, I'm oftentimes impressed by this stuff because I know by this time I just don't even care. I'm exhausted and I'm tired, and I have little patience for stubbornness or any of those things. And yet Jesus is about to have this interaction. And maybe all kidding aside, it is a power nap. He did have a nap on the way over to Gerasenes, Gennesaret, whatever you call it. So he then has this conversation. And remember, we are now back in Capernaum, which is what? Where he's made his home. Not Nazareth, that's where he grew up, but now he's in Capernaum. And I have never found any place, and if you know, please tell me, I'm very curious. Why would he make Capernaum his place of operations, if you will, his home? And so he says to them, why do you think evil in your hearts? So what was the evil that they thought in their hearts? Why do you think evil in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or rise and walk? But that you know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. He says to the paralytic, rise, pick up your mat, and go home. Now also notice in this case, as opposed to, I believe it's a similar story in Luke, here Jesus doesn't forgive sins. He does ask them which is easier, but he doesn't say to the man, your sins are forgiven, therefore get up. He just simply tells him to get up and go home. Yeah.
Forgiven his sins previously in that interaction.
Earlier in the story?
But it looks like in this instance he was only
Right.
he would forgive sins and not heal the paralysis in this instance.
Right.
That's all he was going to do until it was a teachable moment.
Yeah. And obviously assuming that the scribes heard this because they then commented on what he had said. So he tells him to get up and go home. And as you know, John chapter 9 highlights this, that with the guy that was born blind, and the disciples, not the crowd, but the disciples ask, did he sin or did his parents that caused this blindness? You remember Jesus' answer? Neither. Neither one of those is the case. This is happening so that God might be glorified. And so pick up your mat and go home. For that man to stand up in their brains meant that his sins were removed, were taken away. So he rose and went home, and when the crowd saw it, they were afraid, and they glorified God, who had given such authority to man. Yes?
I don't think that this is necessarily the intention, but when I read that, I thought this kind of reaffirms their belief that there was some sin involved in his paralysis. Also in the crowd.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I agree.
So to me, in their minds, they're probably thinking, see?
Yes. Yeah. You forgave it, and now he's healed, and so you took care of that. Yeah. Well, and see, that point has always been very interesting to me, because for us today to say they thought X, they thought that if you had an ailment, it was because of sin. In our minds, we know that's ridiculous. But how many things have you learned over a lifetime that maybe you thought and now you don't think anymore? But when you thought it, it was real. You go back, 500 years, whatever it was, and most of the planet thought that the earth was flat, right? And in fact, somebody got killed because he said what? The earth is a globe. They killed him for that. So for these people, if you have an ailment, somebody sinned. Somebody messed up. You remember in the book of Job, you've got a little more than a third of that book is committed to what did you do that you have these problems? Just admit it. Yeah, Jonathan.
I think you're absolutely correct that equating sin to causing ailments is not something that is, it's not a thing. Like
Right.
whenever they said, who sins, this guy or his parents, that they had a belief in that. But there are sins that do lead to those problems. I mean, if you get drunk and then you go out and crash your car and run into somebody and kill them,
Yes.
then that's a sin that leads to a problem. There's
Yeah.
STDs that
Yeah.
people get because they're sleeping with prostitutes. And so there are sins that are committed that do lead to these problems.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so maybe, I don't know where the delineation is, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's super interesting because in this situation, it seems, and a lot of this is kind of rooted in John 9, where, as well as Job, that this guy's blind and he was born blind, so who did it? Who was the cause of it? And Jesus offers the idea that that's not how this works. And yet you do have cases where people's lives get really bad as a result of decisions they make, as opposed to sin that they do, right? So, yeah, that's a really cool subject for me. Yeah.
It seems to me like, I always wondered, why didn't he tell him to just get up and walk and heal him? But Jesus' whole mission was to teach, not to come here and heal everybody.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
That's what's prophesied,
Yeah.
but it's to teach. And so it seems a little provocative on Jesus' part that he said, your sins are forgiven, like he's purposely trying to spur
Oh, yeah.
conversation with
Yeah.
the scribes so
Yeah.
he can teach,
Yeah.
give a teachable moment.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely cracking their belief system.
As exhausted and tired as he was, it's amazing that he thinks every thought he has is, how can I use this to teach people?
Yeah.
And so it seems, I don't know the motive, but it seems like this was a purposeful thing so he could teach.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we find a lot of instances like this where Jesus approaches it, and he's like, okay, here we go. This is going down. We're going to do this because I know what they're thinking, and I'm going to crash that, because as soon as he says that, this man is blaspheming, and that was a punishable offense to blaspheme against God, you know. And in another stories, only God can do that. Only God can forgive sins. Only God can make these things happen. So, all right. Well, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that, and we'll continue with the gospel.